Welcome to Naturally Inspired Radio, where we expose what's broken in the healthcare system, connect you to real health solutions, and inspire you to take back control of your life. We want to help you feel empowered, informed, and free to live naturally without fear, confusion, or dependency. Download our latest book on real solutions for health at naturallyinspiredradio.com. Naturally Inspired Radio is a nationally syndicated show broadcast on over 100 radio stations, online platforms, video channels, and podcast feeds. Follow us on your favorite platform today, hit that like button, leave a comment, and engage in our special live stream chats, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Visit naturallyinspiredradio.com to learn more, register for our weekly giveaway, and explore past episodes. You can also connect directly with Tammy, follow her on all major social media platforms, and discover more about our featured guests and trusted radio partners. Are you looking for better health? Work with Tammy today and take the first step toward a healthier, more empowered lifestyle. Schedule your complimentary 30-minute lifestyle assessment to explore personalized guidance on nutrition, movement, toxin-free living, and natural beauty without pharma. Get started now and discover Tammy's preferred health products at naturallyinspiredstore.com or text Tammy directly 720-303-8868. Love the show and want to support the movement? Head over to naturallyinspiredradio.com and click on the support tab. There you'll find all the ways you can get involved. Join our Naturally Inspired community, become a preferred customer, attend one of our amazing live events, get your backstage pass for exclusive access, and connect to all things naturally inspired. Thank you for tuning in today. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Today on the Naturally Inspired podcast, we have Kim Witczak joining us. Kim is an international drug safety advocate and speaker with over 25 years professional experience in advertising and marketing communications. She became involved in pharmaceutical drug safety issues after the sudden death of her husband in 2003 due to an undisclosed drug side effect of antidepressants. She was instrumental in helping to get FDA black box suicide warnings added to antidepressants in 2004 and 2006. Kim has taken her personal experience and launched a national public awareness campaign through Woody Matters, a grassroots organization dedicated to make sure the everyday patient perspective is represented in healthcare conversations. Woody Matters put a human face on the real life, sometimes tragic, consequences of our current flawed drug safety system. Kim has been featured in major news media such as Fortune, Reader's Digest, Consumer Reports, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and Star Tribune, as well as subject of numerous local and national TV news stories and documentaries. She has testified before U.S. Senate on FDA-related issues, as well as numerous FDA advisory committees. She was appointed consumer representative on the FDA Psychopharmacologic Drug Advisory Committee in 2016 and is a board member with several nonprofit organizations in the field of drug and patient safety, such as MissD.co, U.S. Patient Safety Network, Recheck Investigative Health Journalism, and Institute for Scientific Freedom. I hope you enjoy this conversation for the Naturally Inspired podcast with Kim Witczak. Thank you so much, Kim, for being on the Naturally Inspired podcast today. It's an honor to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yes, I am too. So let's get started. Let's tell the audience a little bit how you came to start advocating for this field of drug safety. Tell us what led you to this point.
Sure, I like to call myself the accidental advocate because I'm not sure that anyone would ever actually choose this as a field of advocacy work that you want to do. But it was personal for me, and it's happened back in 2003, so almost 19 years ago in August. I was happily married to my husband of almost 10 years, and we were in our he had just started his dream job with a startup company. I had a successful career in advertising, and he started having trouble sleeping which is not uncommon for entrepreneurs, but he was
Oh
a guy
no,
who was
yeah,
always,
we have a lot of
yeah,
sleepless nights.
yeah. So you understand it.
Yeah.
Well, here was a guy that always had 8 hours of sleep. I mean, that was just kind of his pattern.
Right.
And so when he was waking up in the middle of the night, he eventually went to his family doctor, his GP that he's gone to for years, and was saying that he was having trouble sleeping. And at that moment, the doctor gave him a 3-week sample pack of Zoloft, which is an antidepressant, and told
Mm-hmm.
him this should help take the edge off and help you sleep.
Huh.
So Woody went home with a 3-week sample pack of Zoloft, and I happened to be out of the country on a shoot. I'm in advertising, as I mentioned, and I was out of the country on the shoot when he started the drug. Well, the 3-week sample pack automatically doubled the dose after week 1 to week 2.
Oh
And
wow.
so when I got back finally in town, I wasn't there those first 3 weeks when he was on the drug. When I got
Did you
back,
know he was taking it?
yeah, I mean, he told me he was on this drug, but truthfully,
Didn't
you
mean
know,
much.
I mean, it
Yeah.
meant nothing to me. Like, I'm an adult, you're an adult, you go to the doctor, I go,
Yep.
the doctor
Yep.
says, take it, you take it.
Yep.
So never thought anything of it. And I remember coming back but I was still talking to him. I was down in Australia, and he was just saying he was still not feeling great. But again, when I got back into Minneapolis, I remember like being excited for him to come walking in the door, making dinner or something. And he had on his blue dress shirt with a white undershirt underneath, and it was completely drenched through it. He walked in our back door, dropped his bag on the floor, and fell into a fetal position in front of our dishwasher. And he's like, "Kim, you got to help me. I don't know what's happened to me. My head's outside my body looking in. You got to help me." And he's just rocking back and forth. And I'm like, like I had never seen that behavior ever.
Right.
And so we calmed him down. And, I'm like, let's pray, let's breathe, let's do
Yeah.
yoga, like anything to calm him down. So eventually he calls his doctor and said he was having this head outside his body where he felt detached from his
Yep.
body.
Yep.
And the doctor said, you got to
They
give it
call that depersonalization.
or
Yep.
akathisia, which is the side effect.
Yeah.
And they told him you have to give it 4 to 6 weeks to kick in. And so every single night the next week, Woody would say to me, "Kim, what do you think about hypnosis? I'm going to beat this feeling in my head." And then the next night it would be like, "What do you think about acupuncture? I'm going to
Right.
beat this feeling in my head." So he kept like, and here's a guy who was also still during this whole time, he was a training for running. So he was super anal and kept a running journal of how many
Yep.
miles he ran. He's like, "Kim, I don't know. I can only probably get about 3 miles in because my body just feels horrible." So anyways, that was week 4 of the drug. I go out of town again on a shoot, and I hadn't heard, I called him, talked to him on August 5th, great. The next day I kept calling him. We talked all the time because we both traveled for our jobs,
Okay.
and I hadn't heard from him all day. And I kept like, that's so weird. Like I always hear from him. And I, left him voicemail and then an email. And then eventually I called our home voicemail, and there was a message from the guys he was working with in the new business saying, "Hey, Tim, where are you? We haven't heard from you all day." And at that moment I was like, something's not right, because they had a huge meeting the next day. So I asked my dad, who my parents live, pretty close. And I asked my parents to go over and just see if I said, Woody's been really tired. I'm afraid he might have hit his head. That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
And all of a sudden I'm sitting in the studio in Detroit and I get a call. It's my dad. He's like, it's bad. It's bad. And I'm like, what do you mean it's bad? And he's like, Woody's dead. I'm like, what? I'm like, what do you mean Woody's dead? And he's like, he's hanging. I'm like, what? Like it
Wouldn't
literally,
compute. Yeah.
like there was nothing in, and I, of course, was trying to, like, I'm in the middle of shooting. I get this, like, he's dead. And truthfully, it didn't even, like, why would a guy who loved life, who didn't have a history of depression or any other mental illness, like, why would he? I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? And he's like, I mean, I couldn't even comprehend. And intuitively, at that moment, nothing made sense. Although my entire life had just fallen apart,
Right.
And
Right.
interestingly enough, as I was in out the coroner, so my brother-in-law came over with my sister, and the coroner called me and asked if he was on any medication. And I'm like, I couldn't even remember the name of it. And I said, well, there's something upstairs. And she goes, no, actually, she goes, there's a bottle of Zoloft sitting on the kitchen counter. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's it. And she goes, we're going to take it with us. It might have something to do with his death. And
Whoa.
I'm like, what? And so, like, that didn't mean anything to me, right? But
Right.
my brother-in-law that night went home and Googled Zoloft and suicide. And all this stuff came up, including that the FDA had hearings in 1991 when it was just Prozac on the market, and there were all these suicides that were happening. And so the other irony, Woody did not leave a note, and like I said, we always left notes when we traveled. And to think that he went on the biggest trip of his life and there were no notes. There were notes in that bottle was one, and the other one was the front page of our paper. The Minneapolis Star Tribune had an article that day, ironically, that said the UK finds link between antidepressants and suicide in teens.
Wow.
So all of that kind of converged on that. And then at the end of still, as I'm sitting there, I just intuitively knew there's no way that Woody was depressed and everybody kept telling me, well, you just didn't know. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you. So anyways, that's the story. That's kind of what started it all. And
were you, when you came home that day and he was soaked in sweat and you started to realize how serious this kind of non-sleeping was, I guess at that point, did you correlate it to the non-sleeping? Did you correlate it to the medication at that point? No.
Not at all. I didn't think anything of the medication because, the doctor gave the medication to him, and I don't think Woody ever questioned it and we were also told it's safe and effective. And so I don't think it didn't even cross my mind, although the idea of what was happening head outside his body was enough to say, hey, you should call your doctor.
Right.
But the doctor said, you got to give the medication 4 to 6 weeks to kick in.
That blows my mind right there because I don't understand this concept of you're going to get worse before you get better. I mean, that just seems so foreign to me, like I understand that concept when we're like trying to build habits or change things in our life, we have to make sacrifices, but like your body's symptoms are signals.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where intuition, now looking back,
right.
I wish I would have seen it, or, I also look at it as a huge missed opportunity, it's what I eventually went to go do, which is get black box suicide warnings put on these drugs. But, there weren't any warnings then. There wasn't anything that was even like, there was no conversation around these other than these are going to help take the edge off and will help you sleep. That was the only thing. And it was in a sample pack, 3-week sample pack.
Which the doctor got for free.
That the doctor got for free. Exactly.
Yeah. Gosh, I can totally relate with, these warning signs that we kind of overlook because we're so programmed to think, well, my doctor knows best. My son was injured by a vaccine when he was 2, and it never occurred to me for him not to take the vaccine because the doctor said it was safe. It never occurred to me that there was a whole insert that stated that there were side effects to this, which he ended up getting. One of the side effects which was life-threatening, where his blood would not clot. So very serious side effect. But it never occurred to me that my doctor wouldn't even know that. And my doctor did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can totally relate to how you're saying, like, in hindsight, my son's body was actually signaling to me from his first shots that he was having trouble with them. Wow. But I didn't know that. Right.
Yeah,
so
I think
we just overlook it. We just overlook it because we're just trained to think that our doctors have this knowledge. And in all reality, they don't.
Right. Absolutely. And I think there's something else, another principle this idea of intuition and, whether it's a mother's intuition, a parent's intuition, or your spouse, something is not, or even for yourself, like if you start thinking, I never feel this way, why do I now? Because our bodies are one of our greatest indicators of what's going on. And they tell us stories if we listen.
Absolutely. I could not agree with that more. You always say that you're not anti-drug, right? You're pro-information. And this really, I connected with this because number one for me is freedom, right? People need to have freedom to choose because, like you just described with intuition, who am I to enforce what I think is right upon you and have you go against what your body is indicating to you? So can you talk about why that's the stance you've taken and what you mean by pro-information?
Yeah. So prescription drugs can be life-saving for some, but they also can be harmful for others. So again, it kind of goes to that information. I'm pro-information. I'm pro-transparency. I'm for truth and disclosure. I want honest reporting of side effects. I want you to give us all the information of what could potentially be harmful or things that we should be looking for. And I remember, I was looking back at my 2004 speech that I gave to the FDA addressing when we were in the process of getting black box warnings put on these antidepressants. And I will never forget one of the things I said to them. We do not need you to decide what information we need and what information will scare us. Give us all the information and let us decide what information, so that we actually we're coming from a place that we have the opportunity to actually, like when Woody was having this head outside the body, maybe I would have, maybe I would have been able to see that, oh, it's the drug. Or better yet, maybe if there had been a warning when Woody was given the drug and it was actually told to the doctor and the doctor told Woody, he might have said, well, there's a risk of suicide. Like, why would I be taking a drug that might have risk of suicide when I just can't sleep? Like, are you telling me there's no other thing that I can't do because I'm not sleeping? Or the fact that, hey, I just started a new job. It might be you're not used to the middle of the night wake up calls. That, something's on your mind, that's normal. There's so many things. But again, I go back to, so I'm not anti-information, but it's funny. Just like what we're seeing today in the vaccines, like you're anti-vax. I'm like,
yes.
What? It's the same. Again, there's so many parallels, I think, with what's happening today and what was back in antidepressants. Because back then, when we were asking for warnings and there were big FDA meetings, there was a whole group of people, including after I testified in the Senate, that one of the, which I learned a whole other thing, about patient advocacy groups, but somebody from NAMI, National Alliance of Mentally Ill, went around and told all the senators that I was a Scientologist. And that's what they were doing. And so that is exactly, like, I've been through the name calling, and that's what they were doing back in the day when you were
Right.
talking about being I wasn't saying take the drugs off the market. I was just saying put the warnings on, like
Right.
put the warnings. There were other people who were saying take the drugs off the market. That was not my,
Yeah.
that was never going to be my point of view. Mine was put warnings on so we
Right.
have information. So it goes back to your question of not anti-drug. I'm pro-information. I'm pro-transparency.
Yeah.
But
Let's talk about the black box warning because we've talked about it on this podcast before, but I want to make sure that people understand what that is. So can you explain that?
sure, when a drug has a black box warning, it's the most serious of an FDA warning that gets put on these drugs. It's actually, there's been some association with like serious hospitalization or death. And it actually is it's in a black box
Yep.
in the paperwork that comes with your prescription. So, if you don't look at it when you get it at the pharmacy, you should definitely ask your doctor if there is a black box warning on these drugs, because that's something that we do need to pay attention to, or at least be aware of. And then it also has other things that a black box warning can do, such as it affects the way, in our country, in the U.S., we allow drug ads. So that has to be, if it's in a magazine or on a website or on television, that kind of warning,
Right.
impacts that as well. So it is definitely something to pay attention to, because it takes a lot to get one put on.
Yep.
And it's
Because they
something
fight it tooth and nail.
and we're still
Yep.
seeing now. I'm just seeing. I just got an email from somebody that there's groups that are out saying that these black box warnings on the antidepressants are what's causing the teen suicide rate. And I'm like, there's a lot of other things. So they've been from day one trying
Right.
to get these warnings off of these
Right.
drugs. So anyways.
Is it also the black box warning? Does that indicate temporary use as well in some instances?
It might be. I know, like with the antidepressant, it could be such things as even addiction, right? Addictive qualities. Or, when I look back at antidepressants, they don't have this in the black box, but the antidepressants were actually only studied for a short clinical trial, short length, and they were never meant to be taken for years.
Yes.
And so though that information, I would still like to get into a black box warning, but that's another thing that should be in there. It would be great if it was.
Yeah.
Just so.
Well, there's just so many studies now that have come out, of course, unfortunately, way beyond 2003. We're talking fairly recently that, exercise and lifestyle has just as effective, if not more effectiveness against depression, anxiety, and insomnia, things of that nature, than medication.
Absolutely. And I don't think with a serious, so obviously suicide's at one extreme of the side effects, right? But there are things such as your increase, like your sex life.
Yeah, erectile dysfunction,
there's
lack
all
of
these
libido.
other ones, right?
Yeah.
That I think if you even had that information, you'd be like, well, maybe
I don't want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
well, those
Doc,
things ruin your
something else?
life. Those things ruin your life. I was just reading in a book I finished about a man in his 30s who ended up taking antidepressants. He thought he was depressed. It turned out he just didn't like his job. He really just didn't like his job, but didn't really have understanding how to get out of that or whatever. Ended up impacting his sex life with his wife. They ended up with a divorce. Like these are serious consequences for a split-second decision.
Split second. I know that there's somebody else that I met who ended up doing a documentary about his experience trying to get off. And it was the realization when his mother died and his daughter was born, and he felt nothing. Like he felt the exact same emotion, nothing. And so that was at the point where he was like, a light bulb went off for him to think about it. Yeah. And then he looked back and he goes, why did I ever get put on these? He's been taking them for over 10 years. And almost as if it was a daily vitamin that he just got in the habit of taking. Yeah. And he looked back, and it was from a breakup in college. So that split second, and he's not even with that person.
Right.
And so he couldn't, so he tried to get off of the off of Paxil, and he couldn't get off. His body had become addicted to it.
Yeah.
So it was, those are things that we don't necessarily know about or are told about when we go to the doctor, and we don't even have that. Like, it might not be the right first thing we should try.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm like,
Yes. And this is what you talk about when you talk about informed consent, right? I mean, this is true informed consent. And we see that playing out today now. Just recently, the CDC has admitted that they withheld information about these COVID-19 shots because they just flat out said it. We thought you'd misinterpret it.
Yeah. Vaccine hesitancy. Like,
yes.
No, again,
yes.
If there's, do not decide what information we need and don't need. Let us have the information so that we are at a fair, like right now, it's like this, and we're down here. Like, if there's a scale, like we're not at the even playing field as the patient, or as I like to call us, consumer or the customer.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the information, and informed consent in my mind also means asking, what would happen if I do nothing at all? Like,
Good point.
So it's not always just I think we've become so, this idea of safe and effective is in our brains. It's like we've been told everything's safe and effective, that it means really nothing anymore. Like,
mm-hmm.
Oh, well, the doctor told me it's safe and effective. Like, it's kind of an empty promise, right?
Yeah.
So that assumes that you're going to take it, right?
Yeah.
A drug. So, but there is also this idea of informed consent. What happens if I decide not to, for whatever treatment it is? Right. That should be part of our conversation that we have with our health providers as well.
So true. Because like, what could possibly happen if I don't do this? And in this case, those discussions are shut down immediately with today's ongoings, right? Because honestly, it's a 99.75 or 7 or 8% chance of survival at this point. And even that's kind of questionable because those people who have passed away have comorbidities. There's a lot of other factors there that's still unclear. So because the data is just not reliable at this point. And so many very reputable people are saying that the data is just not reliable. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. But yeah, what are my chances? Almost 100% survival rate, or now thousands upon thousands of injuries and debilitating injuries. We're seeing, 23,000 deaths in the VAERS database at this point. But what I think people aren't focusing on is the disability rate is far higher than that. We're talking about, not working ever again.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've met some of those people who were, that one ran the vaccine program at her health clinic. Another one ran corporate responsibility at a financial institution, so something completely different. But they thought they were doing it for the greater good, and in the beginning, and one being more forced. But at the end of the day, both of them are on disability. And what is that really costing? And, they just want their lives back. They would take that in a heartbeat. But again, when the whole idea of, or when we said, like, what I saw here was one size fits all, like, I mean, we all know, like, even in the antidepressant class, like, you'll hear a lot of people will say, oh, well, this drug, I had a horrible experience, the same thing that happened to Woody, but this one I was fine. Like, even drugs, impact your body differently. So to say something is a one size fits all just is so crazy, beyond crazy to me.
Yep, it's absolutely insane. The fourth leading cause of death in the U.S., which is shocking, right? The fourth, because the first is heart disease. The second is cancer. The third is medical error, right? And the fourth is these prescription drugs, right? Medications.
So it'll be interesting to see when the new numbers come, after all the COVID.
Yeah, no
but
kidding.
This was before COVID.
Okay.
These numbers, but they estimate 128,000 people die every single year for properly prescribed prescription drugs. So those are, it might be adverse events that are happening. It might be that you're on multiple medications. Right now, what is it? 70% of Americans, 60 to 70%, take at least one prescription drug every single day. And by the time we're seniors, it's 5 or more. And some say even more than that. But then, how much in these properly prescribed, one doctor's giving you this and you have a side effect, and then you get another drug, and then you get another drug and another drug. And all of a sudden now you're on the whole cocktail of drugs that isn't actually the side effects that were creating the initial issue that another drug got put on into the mix.
Yeah.
So I think
polypharmacy.
Polypharmacy.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it reminds me of a story of my mom actually had a friend whose daughter passed away in her recliner because she was young with a young baby. And she was on some kind of medication. She went to the dentist and took something else for pain, and they, commingled and caused her to pass away in her sleep in her 20s.
Wow. Yeah, that's horrible.
Right. So we don't think anything of it. We're on something from a medical doctor approved. Then we just take this extra thing for pain from our dentist approved.
Right.
But those
they're all approved.
Yeah. And that dentist and that doctor have no idea.
Mm-mm. And they're not asking. And that's why I think there's a new whole a practice area of medicine, which is this idea of polypharmacy. So I've heard even I have, again, one of my friends, her dad is becoming almost psychotic. And I said, well, have you ever looked at all of the medications that they're on? Could it be? And I said, that might be something that one of the first things I would do, in addition to going to the doctor and seeing if it's something else, is it the combination of all the medications? And then maybe you can start taking them off,
Right. I think people think of these medications that cause death. This is a big number, 128,000. And that's before what we're going through right now. But I think they think of it as things like it's, pain medication alone. Right.
Yep.
And that's not the case, is it?
Mm-mm. So these, that number does not include overdose from all of our opioid issue. So that is just properly prescribed, and it really is quite a phenomenal number. But the one thing why it doesn't in my mind, it seems like a lot, right? So if that was 128,000 people on a bunch of airplanes,
right,
crashing, boom, you would pay attention. But I think the reason why people don't really pay that much attention, there are a bunch of one-offs. It's one-off.
Right.
It's one-off. And so it's not until you can actually kind of, group it and see that, whoa, what are the similarities? It's, it's why I always feel like it's super important when there are adverse effects, harms will never lead. Harms will always follow, and so if there are, we should be reporting them. And there should be people, instead of telling people now that the VAERS system for the vaccine injuries, it's not very reliable. Yeah. Well, it never has been really reliable, but it's always served with the MedWatch program, which is where we can report side effects of drugs. It's always has been to be a signal to the FDA that we need more investigation. It's not saying it's a causal, but is there a correlation? Yeah. And so we need to take these things seriously. And we also know that only a small percent actually ever get reported.
Yeah.
So
I never reported my sons. It took me years to figure it out.
Yeah.
It took me years to figure it out. So yeah, it's absolutely 100% that they aren't being reported. I know people who are vaccine injured that have no clue that that's what it was, and they would refuse to believe that. But we have the dang side effect listed on the insert. That just kind of happened with someone I know with Bell's palsy. She was adamant that Bell's palsy is not related to vaccine injury whatsoever, never has been. They know that it's not. And I was like, wow, she was like, yeah, I was like, wow, that's still, people don't know that Bell's palsy is absolutely related to
flu vaccines.
Yes.
Just on the regular flu vaccines.
Yes. But this belief system, that we love, our doctors love us. People say that all the time. My doctor loves me. My doctor called me at home to check up on me. Yeah. Cause he's worried about his liability insurance.
Yeah. I was like, I learned, so I think that's part of the whole problem, right? Like, there's this inherent trust. We trust our doctors. Not my doctor would never.
Yes.
Or even they did studies where they were talking about how pharmaceutical money could influence doctors. Well, even the doctors will be like, well, it doesn't influence me. It might influence my coworker, but it doesn't influence me. Right. So we all kind of, say not me, but the reality is, I look, so one of the things during my, the antidepressant, I had a big lawsuit against Pfizer, and I got documents out from under seal. And one of them was this side effect called, the akathisia, which was that depersonalization, head outside the body. And they intentionally, it was an internal sales memo. They intentionally kept that side effect from the GPs. It wasn't suitable, quote unquote, wasn't suitable for them, and only for neurologically inclined psychiatrists. So they knew that 70 to 80% of their business came from GPs. And if they told their GPs about akathisia, it might actually, so they didn't even tell our GPs and our doctors. So this whole idea of, not my doctor, well, do we even know that our doctor even knows?
Yes.
Has been told, do they even know, or have they bought into, they're safe. We learned about it at school, in med school, for one class, we learned how drugs work. And who teaches it? The pharmaceutical industries. Or
they fund the schools.
Yeah. So.
Yep. I know it. It's absolutely insane. You're uniquely qualified to talk about this stuff too, because you have 25 years in advertising, right? I mean, you see how something's sold.
Yeah, it's really, it's funny. I look back and, you look at our lives, and it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Doing the work that I do, I've been in advertising my whole life. So I understand how we sell, how we get in, how we manipulate. I know how we actually, if we want to get a campaign sold in, we have to manipulate, the research. To get the results. So we know how to get, if we want a positive result, how to figure out how to get the positive
result. You go pay
result.
Someone to provide you that.
And you get the right people, you kind of control everything along the way. And, there's real power in fear messaging and hope messaging. And so I feel like a lot of even the drug commercials or the drug manufacturers, they're marketers. And they go to some of the top MBA schools to grab their marketing people to come work for them. They understand the data. They understand how social media works. They know how to, and actually, if you talk to a lot of lawyers, what's the first thing they do? If you're able to sue a manufacturer, they go into the marketing department. They want the marketing documents, because that's where a lot of it lives. Because it's all about how we sell things. And so I have that as a backdrop, and then I have the personal experience of Woody, and I also sit on an FDA panel. Right. So I've seen the dog and pony shows, as we call them. And that's what, we actually call them, when we're getting ready to sell a client, and we call them dog and pony shows. And we also, as part of an advertising, we have to go and dig deep into the client, whether it's a new client that we're going to go and get to understand what does the competition look like? What is the upside, the downside, the good, the bad, the ugly. So we have to like turn a business inside out and really understand the business side of marketing, which always comes down to like, what does Wall Street say?
Right.
So I always have that. Yeah. So it's a very interesting like background that I have.
Yep. And by the time it gets to the doctor, all that work is done and all those battles have been fought about what TV commercial is going to play on and whatnot. So, New Zealand and the US are the only two countries that can run advertising on TV. How does that impact how these drugs are accessible? Because now people can go into the doctor's office and ask for these lifestyle drugs, right? And that's what they're selling with these commercials, in my opinion. This is a lifestyle. Look at me. I no longer have this psoriasis. I am so happy now. And they're selling happiness in a pill form.
It's funny. It is absolutely, they know it works. A lot of times, you'll go in and ask for the brand, right? Yep. You see the imagery. And you don't really, like, even when they're doing the side effects, the side effects are at the end of the commercial and they're like, blah, 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 death. And you're like, but it's also over really happy imagery. So you don't really pay attention to it. And by that time, you're like, you've bought into, oh, well, all drugs have side effects. So you're like, that won't happen to me. But it's also interesting in all the other things and ways that they market, or, it's still part of the marketing, which is like they fund, meaning the pharmaceutical companies fund these patient and disease advocacy groups. So they're part of the marketing arm. So there's all of these other influences that are considered marketing, not just what we see as the consumer being advertising, but it's all of, many times at the FDA meetings, you'll have all these disease groups coming and they all get funding. So of course they're going to want more drugs, more things for their people that they're advocating for. So it's all of I call it the spider web of influence of ways that the companies still market to, like, ghostwriting. Ghostwriting is a huge thing that the companies do. They write, like, one of the other documents that came out from the Zoloft Pfizer was they had the whole publication plan of what journals their articles were going to appear for, and it was, I think, social anxiety disorder. But they had a couple where they already knew the month, what, issue, who was the author, but there were a couple that said Dr. TBD, Dr. TBD. So they already knew when it was running, but they didn't have
to be determined.
They didn't have who the doctor who was going to be putting
their name on
it. Mm-hmm. So these are all the ways that marketing influence. So it's more than just the advertising that we go and, as the consumer, go to our doctor. It's all the undue influences that we don't see.
And how perfect for a doctor, because now they get the writing credit to being published and whatnot too. So it's like, wow, it makes me think of, hopefully you watched Dope Sick. Did you watch that series? Yeah. I bet that was hard for you to watch. It was definitely hard for me to watch.
Oh, it's just like, I get like,
yeah, I was like screaming at the TV. Yeah. The thing about it was the double ending of the whole deal, right? Because now the funding for the treatment centers are coming from the pharmaceutical companies, and that's a very small price for them to pay, right? But then again, I started to think, well, the guy that's running the treatment center, he doesn't want the cash flow to stop either. What kind of sickening business model is this?
Well, you know what? I've always said healthcare is a business. And we as consumer, we just use it because we want to get sick, or we're sick and we want to get better. So we don't really think about it. But healthcare is a huge business. And even some of these, like, I'll take it off tangent for a quick second, but like during the COVID, there's businesses now that are responsible for productions that I'm on for advertising, that they do nothing but make sure they check temperatures, make sure that nobody's sitting, for more than or closer than 6 feet at tables. And these are businesses that have evolved when the COVID crisis happened. Yeah. So now I'm like, these guys
COVID economy.
Yeah, like, no, these guys aren't going to want, and yet at the same time, I get, people are entrepreneurs, but we have to have some honest conversations that,
Mm-hmm.
these are businesses that just keep, it's kind of the
Perpetuating
system. Yeah.
sickness.
It's
Yeah. And dysfunction in society,
and
right? I
lots
mean, if
of
you're
loss of
making
money.
masks right now, you certainly don't want the masks to go away, do you?
No, I mean, why? I mean, again, it's your business.
Yeah. Ugh, it is so sickening.
Yeah, I know.
Let's talk about the government side of it with the special interests, because this is another area where I think people don't have enough understanding. I think, maybe people think, well, yeah, politicians kind of take money here and there, but man, this is an enormous problem in the pharmaceutical industry. We see what we call a revolving door of people who work in government administration, and then, administration change, they go right back into the pharmaceutical positions of CEO and heads of these pharmaceutical companies. And it just goes on, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. First of all, just in recent days, you look at Scott Gottlieb,
Yep.
who was the FDA commissioner, and all of a sudden, like at late, I think 2020, all of a sudden out of nowhere, he's like, oh, I'm going to resign from the FDA. And then sure enough, I was like, that seems really interesting. And I think it was 6 months later, he announced that he was going to go on the board of Pfizer. And so and we have to remember, and he's just one example, like there are a lot of people who are even at the review level within the FDA that once, they know that part of the game. So what people don't understand is that there was an act back in, I think, 1992 called the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, and it's called PDUFA, and there's one for medical devices. And it basically started after the AIDS crisis, where it took too long for the FDA to approve, that the drug companies paid a fee for their application to get their drug approved faster.
Yep.
Yep. And so what has happened is that it almost creates this like, well, if I'm a reviewer, I can't really say something too bad about it because I might actually need their job. Like there's just this different kind of relationship in it. And so one of the first things that I look back into my advocacy was there was the chief counsel for the FDA who does, who's head of all the legal avenues. Well, I didn't realize that before he worked for a private law firm, before he came into the FDA in that role that did not need congressional approval. So it was just put in by the president in that role. He took $300,000 from Pfizer before he went into that role at the FDA when he was at a private law firm. Well, what he did when he was at the FDA is he started intervening in private lawsuits against Pfizer and Zoloft and suicides. And so that all of a sudden there were lawsuits, say like, Witczak v. Pfizer, and then the FDA would intervene with a preemption brief. And it was all the mastermind of this guy, Dan Troy. Well, eventually it got exposed, and because we helped expose it, he left. He went, and now he is the head, or I don't know if he still is, but when he left, he was the global chief attorney, whatever, legal for GSK out of the UK. So this happens all the time, and it's like, on the one hand, like if you're in industry, you'd be like, oh, this is great. Like we got to get into, like, let's use them, figure out how it's going to work, what they can do for us on the inside, then go back and vice versa.
Right.
That rotate. But at the end of the day, we are the ones that, it might be a smart business move, but it's a really bad idea for our health and our doctors that don't even really pay attention.
Right.
Because they're just trying to, do their
This
job
is such
too.
a conflict of interest. And I think people are under the understanding because, we've just kind of acquiesced with government regulation over the years and had built up this belief that the government's doing their job. And, oh, that seems unethical. That wouldn't happen. There's this belief that maybe, this isn't the way it is, or it's not that bad, but there's this kind of cover your ass type situation here where they're telling you exactly what they're doing. When you start looking into these people's roles, you can trace their careers. They're telling you what you're doing, but I think people carry this belief system like, well, there's got to be some kind of cover your ass type situation where that's not what it seems to be, because it's so unbelievable.
Because it's right in it's right in your face. And you think
Yes.
about it, like even members of Congress kind of do the same thing. And
Yeah.
so it's within our government. And then,
Yep.
so there's so much power and those two working together, right? Like,
Yes.
because they need each other, and they kind of,
Yeah. They got to mold regulation in order to get their products through, just like they have to mold education in order to get their product to the marketplace. And now we have this mind-blowing web of deception where who pays the price, but innocent lives like Woody's.
Yeah. We are, like I always say, at the end of the day, I will always represent the voice of families who live every day with the consequences of a failed drug safety system. And it's people like you and me, your son, Woody. Unfortunately, I know thousands of people over the years who literally just go in trusting and become the, acceptable collateral damage.
Yeah.
The cost of doing business. And that's why most people don't really pay attention to it, because they don't think it'll happen to them. But then once it does, then they say, why didn't I know? And that is why I do what I do, because no one should ever have to ask that question of, why didn't I know?
Yeah. People are using that as an excuse today. I mean, I was just talking to my sister, and she was describing a discussion she had with a friend of hers about the shots and the injury. And her friend, said point blank, well, I don't know anybody that's been injured by the shots. And my sister finally just had to say, listen, you don't want to hear the truth, and you probably won't ever understand it until it happens to you.
Right.
And this is such a horrible, painful experience to watch unfold.
I a lot of times, and I think even with this, I've seen the current situation, it's almost worse because so many people have had the shots. Mm-hmm. And so to learn after the fact, they don't want to hear, as more and more stuff is coming out, they don't want to be told, because no one wants to feel like they were lied to or duped or I don't know anybody. It becomes this very cognitive dissonance kind of attitude. And it's not until it happens to you that your eyes are awakened. For me, this would be the last thing I would do. But once I started digging in and unwinding the onion and unpeeling it, you're like, oh my God, it's insidious. It's everywhere.
It's insidious. Yes.
It's insidious.
Yeah.
And you have no idea. And you just think, all you think is, I'm going to the doctor and I'm getting a prescription that is supposed to help more than it's going to harm.
Yep. Yep. And this belief system that these prescriptions actually heal, when that's a lie. Mm-hmm. The only thing that heals is our bodies themselves. We facilitate healing. And we do that by listening and responding to symptoms, not by covering up symptoms with prescriptions that lead to other symptoms because you never healed the initial one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's masking. I feel like a lot of our, healthcare or the pills, it's just to mask a symptom, but we don't ever ask our bodies what else, what do I need? Because sometimes we do need that part. The symptom is something of a greater thing that's actually happening. Yeah. But we're so trained to.
Yeah. And that it may not be just a physiological issue, that it could be like that man I mentioned earlier in the book I was reading. He actually had he had a behavioral problem with the way he was thinking about his job. He was thinking about his job in such a negative way. It was creating anxiety and stress, and that's not always recognizable when you're in the situation.
No. Mm-mm.
And we discount all of that too. We discount our thinking patterns. That doesn't affect my health. My body is here. My mind is here. These are two separate things. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
I always say now, like, we are mental, spiritual, and physical beings, and all three need to work together. And I think, we've for so long just like, this is one silo, this is another silo. But the reality is, I know for myself, when I get really worked up on something, it ends up somewhere like in probably my stomach or a backache, or I'll go, like my hips, there'll be somewhere where it shows up, and it's because of like like, think you're stressed and you hold it somewhere. And even after Woody died, the grief of it, I held it in my diaphragm, and it was a deep, and it wasn't until I started doing body work that I was releasing that. But it all started from a loss of here, and then so it all is. We have to remember we're treating the body as a whole, and a lot of times,
and that's not a frou-frou saying, like, that's unfortunate too, because some of these things that the words we use to express ourselves, treat the whole body, the mind body, they've become a little bit frou-frou-y and like new agey or something. But we need to kind of take back our language and really understand that it is the whole body. When this business of general practitioners really split off into specialists in allopathic medicine, this is where we started having a lot of problems, because now people were just focused on tonsils. They were just focused on heart. They were just focused on liver or whatever, right? They had all these, we have all these specialties. And in reality, when you're having a dis-ease in your body, your whole body is out of sync. You are not in homeostasis, but yet we think we're going to fix the problem by just going to a heart doctor. And
that's where the symptom is, right?
Right.
Like that's,
right. It's a belief system. Yes.
Yeah. And we're a system. Like we are a system, maybe that's the better word. I know it's too bad, because, it gets caught up in that whole idea of foo-foo. But it's not like,
no,
these are all connected. Like, it's not,
how can you think it's not?
No, totally. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. What is the FDA, what is it? Psychopharmacologic Drug Advisory Committee. Gosh, that's a big word. What
trust me.
Speaking in front of a whole group, I don't want to say that word.
Psychopharmacologic Drug Advisory Committee. So I'm the consumer representative on this advisory committee, and it is an advisory committee, such as the one we've seen with the vaccines, where that's just vaccines. This advisory committee is a committee of outside experts that look at anything to do with the psychiatric type drugs or opioid abuse type drugs. And so I represent the voice of the public as the consumer rep. And then I'm on the committee with a bunch of academics, and there's so many things. But this is the committee that first held the hearings back in 1991 on the antidepressants, or when it was just Prozac and the risk of suicide. And every one of those committee members took money from the industry. And they said, when all this data was coming through and all these stories were coming forward, they were like, nope, we don't see any indication that there's any correlation. And so they didn't say we need to study suicidality. So I think it's kind of funny. It's come full circle that I sit on it, and I take my role really, really, really serious. Even if I'm the only no vote, that if there's something years down the road, they will like go back and they'll see that
she voted no. There was one person. Yeah. And
so I take it, it's really, and when it goes before an advisory committee, just like what we're seeing with the vaccine, the COVID vaccines, even though they didn't do some of the big decisions in front of an advisory committee, and they should have, but it's really when there is some kind of maybe issue, maybe it's this could have like a big public, say it was taken off the warnings or something like that might be where we'd have one. It might be, most of the drugs that are coming before my committee have used some kind of fast tracking mechanism, meaning that they don't use, which clearly the FDA reviewers are like, oh, we might want to, because if we approve this and it's controversial, at least we can have the support of the that we took it in front of the advisory committee. So a lot of times I kind of feel like sometimes they're doing that from, they want us to review something, and is it ultimately, do they already have their decision made and they just want to see that we've,
so they can kind of buffer the blame.
Yeah. So most of the drugs that have been coming before us are really fast tracking, meaning that there's no drug on the market, so that clinical trials might be that you don't need the 2 double-blinded placebo gold standard. You might only do 1, and then you might use an observational study over here. So the whole idea of the clinical trials really becomes like there was one, it was only 180 patients in it for a big Parkinson's psychosis drug. And and when I looked at, and I was saying, looking at how Wall Street fits in, I always love to go and see what does Wall Street say about this drug, and and read the CEO, which is more than what we're supposed to do, which is looking at the data. But I'm the consumer rep, so I come from a different perspective. And so I went and saw that this drug had the potential to be a 2 to 3. One of the Wall Street analysts said it had the potential to be a $2 to $3 billion a year drug off label. So I was like, wait, we're going to get this approved on 180 people, which is half placebo. So like 90 people that's going to be used potentially for all of these other people. I'm like, oh, this is such a great, again, doing it with this fast tracking mechanism, because there is no drug that they're using, and everything they've been using was off label. So this would be approved for this purpose, but so there's a lot of those kind of things that are happening behind the scenes as well.
Right. I want to ask you what your thoughts are, because this is something I've noticed with the increase of mass shootings, right? We didn't see school shooters years ago. Like when I was growing up, it was unheard of, right? This is something that has kind of trickled into society. And to me, in my opinion, it correlates with these drugs that we're using to treat ADHD, depression, anxiety in young people. Is there any kind of study or any kind of correlating evidence that is being looked at in terms of this?
I wish this has been something I have been advocating for a long time, that I think it needs a government study doing it. But I think there are other, there's some organizations that have looked at, because there's I don't know the exact number of international warnings that are on for violence, hallucinations, psychosis on these drugs. So these drugs can cause, in a condition with all the other things, there are links to it. So there should be, I've always advocated for every time there's another shooting, I'm always like, and we all go after the low-hanging fruit of the guns. But, but the thing is, we should actually dig a little bit deeper. So there are 2 things. One of the documents that came out from under seal in my lawsuit was something that Pfizer had to help to create, a prosecutor manual for that was from the 90s on Zoloft. And it was for people who were going to claim that the Zoloft made them do it. And so that was in the 90s. And so literally they have known, if you look at the German BGA, which is their FDA equivalent, Prozac was not approved initially for 2 reasons: risk of suicide and violence and lack of efficacy. That was in the 80s. So they have long known that there's an association. And the FDA just took off because Pfizer came to them after the Chantix, which is anti-smoking. And there were huge lawsuits that were like psychosis, where people were like violent and hallucinations. They were, and I was super excited because I was going to be on the committee, and I had knew that there were I wanted to know where the victims were. But in the they did not go to the FDA until all the lawsuits were settled, and every victim signed a piece of paper in exchange for money that they could never tell their story in public. And so They took that warning off. And so that warning does not even exist now, that people don't understand that there was a black box warning. And so when I look at the links, I actually went down to Parkland, Florida after the Parkland shooting and met with families with my lawyers that were the ones that did the original stuff, and they actually just won the big Roundup suits, Roundup against Monsanto.
Yep.
They said they were going down there, and I'm like, I'm coming down there. I don't care if I'm paying, because I just want people to start asking those questions.
Yes.
I just again, it's not to say it's the reason,
right,
but is it a part of why we're seeing more?
Yes. I mean, it blows my mind because I read about these families and I hear these murmurings of like, well, they were on psychotropic drugs at one point. We need to look at all facets of this, because stopping these drugs, right? And we're talking about teenagers and young kids. Are they taking pills every day? No. Like, are they taking it consistently? Like, we don't really know. And to just stop something, we know we're not supposed to do that, right? It can change drastically your brain chemistry and cause catastrophic results. And these things, this is all part of the components of it. And because of the fear of retribution to the pharmaceutical companies, they're in this mode of don't even look at it. Don't even look at it, right? And so when is someone going to look at it?
I wish that, I would love to that means there would have to be somebody that another situation happens, but I would love to see some kind of law firm go after and represent if there is something, but ultimately, things get shut down right away under the HIPAA laws. So
it certainly seems like all the laws are in their favor, right? And then this other component, like we're going to see this now, where a lot of families quietly, go away in terms of the COVID shots because they've signed non-disclosures, and they'll pitch it to the family, at a time when they're emotionally distraught, and they'll pitch it to them like, well, you don't want to cause more harm to the public, right? This is very rare. This would never, and then they'll wave a check in front of them. People don't realize that that's what's happening.
Well, it's even, but in some ways, unless, so right now with the COVID vaccines, the manufacturers cannot be sued.
Yeah, they
can't even be sued.
Emergency use
emergency use. So if somebody got harmed, so then you now have to go to this countermeasure program to get
which is
it,
a joke.
and which is even more of a right. Like, will you even get it? And to your point, even if there is somebody, let's say that you've protected the hospital or the doctor, and there was something, I think that's the problem with any time you have lawsuits, that you have to be quiet and never tell your story. Like I look back to when I knew nothing about what it would be like to be in a lawsuit, but I will say this, that I said from day one, I will never sign anything that I can't talk. Because think about it, if that would have happened, I wouldn't be. I mean, all this time that I've been doing this work, like it was never like there's never enough money that'll take that will ever bring. They have insurance policies that pay for all that. It's no big deal. I still believe until we can start holding the executives of these companies accountable personally. That and there's criminal charges and things like that. Can we make change? Because right now it's just like, we got insurance for that.
And then they have these little systems all played out, like the Sackler family, right? Who just experienced the lawsuit against Oxy and stuff. And will they ever feel any pain? No, because they've hidden assets and have shell companies and transferred things. They've had all this time to do it because their lawyers, drown the opposition in discovery with, millions and millions of documents. So these lawsuits drag out over years and nothing ever really happens. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating.
It is frustrating. It is frustrating because you feel like it's the little people, us, against these big companies and well-oiled established machines. But I think we need to try and do what we can.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm talking about personal responsibility a little bit here too, because, it's weird because, you feel like you're up against this huge machine and everything, but actually we're extremely powerful in the way that when people like yourself talk and spread information and we become knowledgeable, we can take personal responsibility at that point, right? What does our personal responsibility, what kind of power does that hold for us in terms of, getting back at these huge companies?
Well, at the end of the day, I think we are really powerful as individuals if we have the information. And so I think it is our responsibility when something does happen. It's your responsibility when you go into a doctor to question them. It's our responsibility. I think our health and our well-being is ultimately our responsibility too. I mean, I think things happen, but I think there are, you could just go away and think, I can't do anything. But I remember a principal that my husband was he always took on things in our neighborhood, like the cell phone companies. They were going to put two of them in the same neighborhood competing across the street from each other. And I remember Woody saying, Kim, I'm going to go get like people to sign a signature and we're going to go to the city council. And I'm like, good luck. Like you'll never, I'm like, you'll never win. It's like, you're going to go up against the city council and two phone companies. And I remember what he said to me. He goes, I'd rather try like hell and lose than do nothing at all. And so I think that is something that all of us really have the potential to do, is to take, when something's not right, go out and try to change whatever it is, go and try to change it. And I think with our health, ultimately, personal responsibility of, don't give our power away to somebody that has some letters behind their name, when ultimately your body or your child's body, or you see it, that we give our powers away. And I think it's time that we claim it by standing up, asking questions, and not just being succumb to fear.
Yeah. Yeah. You call it a human epidemic, not just a prescription drug epidemic. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think we're so quick to, as a human versus prescription drug, I think, as a humans, we've been trained to we want everything fast, everything now, I have my phone, I want oh, what was the name of that person? Boom. Oh, wait, I can just Google it and I'll get the name, And so we're constantly want everything fast and at our fingertips, and so the idea of prescription drugs, if you're like my dad, diabetes, on the border of diabetes too. Dad, you could actually change the way you eat and your stuff, but he doesn't want to. Right. That's his choice.
That's his choice. Yeah.
That's his choice. So he would rather take a pill. But I think we're so quick to taking a pill and to solve things, including some of our even mental stuff that we have going on. It's way easier to think that a pill is just going to make that go away. But at the end of the day, that pill doesn't take it away, like grieving. And I remember after Wood died, my doctor asked if I wanted something to help me with the grieving. And I said, well, I think it's the drug I go, first of all, my husband died.
Yeah.
And I go, then he got this drug. But then I looked at her, I go, aren't I supposed to hurt? I'm supposed to hurt. And she goes, no, you don't need to. And I think right there said, that's kind of that combination of human and meets prescription. Wait, I do need to hurt because, but that's because I want to, you have to feel it and go through it, because
it's part of your growth, right? Yes. If you don't ever deal with it, then you're not growing through it. And perhaps if you had taken the drugs and not dealt with it, you wouldn't be doing the work you're doing today. This was part of your purpose-filled life, however horrible, thing that happened, absolutely awful. But this was part of your journey, part of your story. And you wouldn't have had that catapult into the work you're doing. And you've affected, many people's lives with what you're doing. And that just wouldn't have happened had you not grown through your grief and just slapped a Band-Aid on it.
Absolutely. I think of that often.
Yeah.
That, I say that through the most painful part of my life, I found life.
Mm-hmm.
And it only came at great at Woody's expense. But I learned, and I also had to like feel it and grow. And, so I think it is the idea of taking away the pain. Absolutely. Was that brutal?
Oh, I can't imagine. Yeah.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
And, but at the end of the day, it still doesn't change what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to learn how to go through it. And I think that's something that for a lot of us, it's just, we've got to really think about that. And so that's where I go, human and prescription and drug kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, where can people connect with you, Kim? Because your story is so powerful and the impact it has is absolutely beautiful. So where can people connect with you? Website? What upcoming events do you have? How can they support your work?
Oh, well, thank you so much. KimWitczak.com, my website, or Woody Matters. I have a bunch of links there if you want more information of where you can find information.
Yeah. Can you tell us quickly about Woody Matters? I didn't get a chance to mention that.
Woody Matters was the original organization that I put together, and it represents families, but it initially served as a place for all the data and as new articles were coming out. Because remember, this was all before social media.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine if this was going on with social media. We'd probably be called false and misleading.
Oh, right.
But Woody Matters, and it's also, there's a link on KimWitczak.com that brings you there. But there's some helpful resources if you want resources of places to look on side effects and other things on drugs.
You had some great data points on there. I was like, wow, that's startling.
And let's see, my Twitter, I'm using less and less Facebook because I've gotten blocked for saying things. So Twitter, been good. I'm going to start, I got to get the Substack and doing blogging, which, it's just one more millions of things. But I'm also in the process of working on a docuseries that will be covering, and that's what I really want to have out there for people, that it's, that's not my information, because I've had it in my head for so long and it doesn't belong. It belongs out in the world.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a powerful medium, a docuseries. It's so powerful. I'm so glad you're doing that. That's exciting. Yeah. Do you have a name for it yet, or is it still kind of in production?
It's Selling Sickness.
Wonderful. Selling Sickness. Well, thank you so much, Kim, for talking with me today. It's such a valuable topic, and I know we're going to reach a lot of people. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
If the naturally inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the Naturally Inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.